shadow.
Subscribe if you find yourself drawn to the shadows between what is known and what should never be discovered. Your engagement helps preserve these transmissions for others who seek the truth. Tonight, we cross a threshold that most dare not approach, peeling back the comfortable veil of tentacles and monsters to reveal the profound philosophical abyss that lies beneath. The promise is not a jump scare, but a tone, not a creature, but a principle. The promise is forbidden knowledge you can safely cradle if you're careful with the edges. Here is the wager, stated early, within the first breath. Lovecraft's fear is not the thing with many mouths, but the fact that our mouths form prayers to a stage that does not have an audience. The monster is an instrument. The music is cosmic indifference. You will hear it as a hum, behind your gutters and your phone screens, behind your late-night coffee and the window's fog. This knowledge has a cost, not your life, but your capacity to remain comfortably human in a universe that was never designed for human habitation. Consider the word cosmic as Lovecraft wielded it, not merely large, but fundamentally alien to human scale and meaning. His entities are not enlarged animals or malevolent gods in the classical sense. They are principles made manifest, mathematical truths given form, the living embodiment of concepts that human consciousness was never designed to contain. When you encounter Cthulhu, you are not meeting a monster. You are experiencing the collision between your finite mind and the infinite indifference of space. The atoms composing your body follow laws that have no concept of your identity. The stars burn according to nuclear processes that began billions of years before consciousness existed and will continue billions of years after all thought has ceased. The Necronomicon serves not as a prop, but as a conceptual conduit, an imagined engine for making the human mind touch the cold of the void, the key and the gate, the veil and the void. We will trace how this device functions not through supernatural power, but through the precise mechanics of how knowledge destroys the knower, how consciousness becomes its own trap, how the act of understanding can transform you into something that no longer fits within the boundaries of human experience. This is the central mechanic, knowledge as contagion, truth as solvent. It is not ectoplasm that corrodes, it is certainty. Think of this not as a lecture, but an initiation with soft edges. Before we step forward, note your senses. The salt in the air, the lamp halo soft against a curtain, the paper's dry rasp, the silent sign you didn't notice on your desk until now. The objects are anchors, not charms. You will need them when the idea looks back. Place a glass of water beside you. Watch it surface for a moment. Notice how a passing truck makes a ripple, although the glass did not move. That is the signal you're learning to sense. Forces that do not address you, but still rearrange you. The darkness gathers not around you, but within you, as we prepare to examine the architecture of cosmic horror itself. This transformation has already begun in you. The moment you opened this transmission, the moment you chose to seek understanding rather than comfort, you crossed the first threshold. You cannot unknow what you are about to learn. This is not madness, but literacy, a new capacity to read the universe's indifferent text. You will begin to hear hum where others hear silence, to see angles where others see walls, to feel tides in dry rooms. The condition for continuing is simple. Do not mistake a mask for a face or a name for a god. Hold them lightly. Let their meanings pool like dark water. The true horror crystallizes not in the shriek of some tentacled beast, but in the quiet recognition that our entire human drama plays out against a backdrop utterly indifferent to our existence. The universe is not hostile to humanity. It is something far more unsettling, completely unaware of us. We are not the center of cosmic conflict between good and evil. We are not even a footnote in the vast, cold equations that govern reality. Yet here lies the paradox. This very indifference becomes meaningful precisely because we are conscious beings capable of recognizing it. We are the universe becoming aware of its own indifference, matter organizing itself into patterns complex enough to contemplate the void from which it emerged. Lovecraft's genius was transforming this philosophical insight into visceral experience. His stories do not argue for cosmic indifference. They make you feel it in your bones, taste it on your tongue, hear it in the spaces between words, the tentacles and ancient cities, the forbidden books and cyclopean architecture. These are not the point, but the delivery system, the sensory vocabulary through which abstract terror becomes immediate, personal, transformative experience. You are already in the circle simply by wanting to know where circles come from. That want is the key and negate both, a paradox you carry like a coin rubbed smooth by worry. The monster is not the point. The point is the stage that never needed us, yet allows us, like an empty hall that lends beauty to a voice singing alone. The lineage begins not with Lovecraft alone, but with the recognition that certain ideas have always existed, waiting in the spaces between human thoughts like spores in ancient ice. The chill carries forward from cave ceilings to cathedral domes to observatory lenses, a single intuition that grows clearer as instruments sharpen. The universe does not bend to our meanings. Howard Phillips, Lovecraft was not a prophet, but a sensitive instrument, meticulously attuned to the discordant frequencies of an emergent scientific and philosophical paradigm. His horror sprang from the stark, unblinking gaze into the abyss of modern cosmology and the implications of a universe utterly devoid of anthropocentric significance. Before there were tentacles, there were notebooks. Before pantheons, there was a letter from Providence composed at a desk that smelled faintly of paste and old wood, oil lamp casting shadows that seemed to lean inward. Picture the handwriting, small and disciplined, almost architectural, tracing an intuition that had nothing to do with gore and everything to do with scale. Lovecraft's cosmicism emerges from a deceptively simple equation. The universe is vast, indifferent, and older than hope. Human meaning is local, provisional, a lantern in fog. From this arithmetic comes the shiver you feel even in daylight, the sudden awareness that your significance is a story you tell yourself against the silence of space. The prevailing narratives of his era, steeped in Victorian humanism and burgeoning scientific optimism, presented a universe that, while vast, still felt comprehensible, perhaps even benevolent. Progress was the watchword. Science would illuminate all darkness. But Lovecraft saw the cracks in this comforting facade. He absorbed the cold, hard truths of astronomy, the inconceivable distances measured in light years, the crushing scale of nebulae and galaxies, the sheer indifferent mechanics of celestial bodies. He grappled with the nascent theories of evolution, which stripped humanity of its divine centrality, reducing us to a biological accident on a minor planet orbiting an unremarkable star. Each discovery pushed humanity further from the center of creation, revealing the comfortable human drama to be a whisper in an indifferent vastness. Lovecraft did not invent dread from scratch. The ink was primed by predecessors who had already begun excavating the foundations of human confidence. Edgar Allan Poe gave him the chamber and the claustrophobia, the tight room where the mind eats itself, where consciousness becomes its own prison. Arthur Machen offered paths into forbidden ecstasies and degenerate survivals, showing how the pastoral could conceal ancient horrors. Lord Dunsany loaned him the key to the dream stage, where cities float beneath cold stars and the curtain is woven from sleep. Robert W. Chambers, with his Yellow Sign and his King in a Different City, taught him the power of a text that infects the reader, a script that reads you as you read it, transforming the act of reading into a form of contamination. Place the sensory anchors, a penny dreadful with brittle pages that crackle like autumn leaves, the carbon smell of typewriter ribbon, a gaslight's circle shrinking as the wick burns low, the stink of damp stone in basement rooms where strange books gather dust. Imagine the pulps, Weird Tales and its siblings, exhaling this atmosphere into barbershops and rail depots, their lurid covers promising forbidden knowledge for the price of a quarter. The medium was itself a fog, producing rumors of strange books and stranger gods, a stage broad enough for a swarm of audiences who didn't know. They were a chorus. These magazines were not just entertainment, but transmission vectors, carrying ideas that would lodge in readers' minds like seeds waiting for the right conditions to sprout. Against that literary stage loomed the early 20th century, when certainty fell like plaster. Einstein's relativity unseated absolute time and space, revealing them as fluid, interconnected aspects of a single, bewildering reality. Quantum mechanics denied the comfort of predictable trajectories. The world below a certain scale refused to answer in complete sentences. Hubble raised a finger and the galaxies receded, a procession of masks dissolving into depth. The Great War taught a lesson in mechanized indifference. Cosmic horror is not merely fiction's invention. It is the literature of scientific disillusion distilled into ritual. The stars are not lanterns hung on a domed ceiling by a benevolent creator. They are thermonuclear furnaces, separated by distances so vast that light itself takes years or centuries to bridge the gaps between them. Within this storm, a life continues in Providence, rented rooms with thin curtains, night walks over College Hill where frost scuffs brick and the sky feels near but empty, small checks from magazines, long letters sent and received like slow-moving currents. These details matter because they tune the ear. Privation makes the hum of a radiator sound like a drone older than cities. Loneliness makes constellations look like notation without musician. The true circulation began in letters, stamps dampened on tongues, envelopes addressed in an exacting hand, marginalia in pencil. He and his correspondents traded not merely plots but premises. That knowledge can sicken. That space has corners reason cannot enter. That lineage is a mask that remembers water. The origin then is dual, a human life in Providence, letters and drafts and small sums from magazines, and a cosmological life, a century discovering that old assurances were stage paint covering an abyss. You hear how the metaphors align: curtain and cosmos, audience and species, mask and model. The condition for continuing is to accept this dual origin. The monster is shorthand. The real horror is the orchestra of discoveries that made the stage bigger than the script, that revealed humanity as props that moved themselves in a theater without audience. Reset your senses. The slight oil on pulp paper, a winter window rattling in its sash, shoes squeaking on a library's tiled floor. These are the mediums by which an era's disillusion found rhythm, vibrating with the same frequency as observatories and laboratories. The circuit widens now, through magazines and small presses, through friendships and rivalries, through translations that swap one mask for another, until the sign reaches your desk and the curtain rises in your own room. Follow the route of the sign. It begins as a private glyph in a margin, perhaps sketched beside a passage about dreams that leak into waking hours, a symbol that feels both ancient and newly born. Then it appears as a footnote in a story, casual as a citation, but carrying weight that exceeds the text it annotates. From there, it surfaces as a rumor in a letter to a friend, described in careful handwriting that betrays barely contained excitement. Then a magazine editor misprints it, and a reader in St. Louis adopts the altered shape as canon, never knowing the original form. The mask changes and remains the same. The yellow sign becomes the elder sign becomes a tattoo on a forearm filmed in 4K, and each time it performs the same essential work. It selects. It divides the audience into those who recognize the reference and those who see only decoration. The mythos spreads along paper routes first, carried by trains and postal workers who become unwitting acolytes, their mail sacks heavy with pulp magazines whose cheap paper carries expensive ideas. During his lifetime, Lovecraft engaged in extensive correspondence, a network so dense it resembled mycelium spreading beneath the visible literary landscape. Through these missives, he connected with Clark Ashton Smith, crafting decadent visions of dying worlds, Robert E. Howard channeling barbaric vitality, Frank Belknap Long exploring psychological dissolution, August Derleth documenting rural horrors. They became the first conscious carriers of the contagion. They did not merely imitate his surface elements. They metabolized the underlying architecture, grasped the philosophical framework of cosmic indifference, and began weaving their own narratives into its burgeoning tapestry. This early network functioned as more than literary collaboration. It was shared construction of reality through citation and cross-reference. The Necronomicon appears in a footnote to one story, then the Book of Ibon echoes from another author's mouth, and gradually what becomes real is what is most frequently cited. The audience learns to trust marginalia more than dialogue, to find meaning in spaces between texts. You begin to read paratexts like a diviner reads shells, searching for patterns that reveal hidden connections. The effect is genuinely mimetic. Each author adds a city to the map, a sigil to the collection, a melody others can harmonize. It becomes scholarship as sorcery, where cross-references function as incantations, summoning shared hallucinations into consensus reality. The transmission accelerates through pulp magazines whose pages exhale atmosphere into barbershops and train stations. A Weird Tales becomes a vector, its covers promising impossible colors and ancient cities. Readers encounter fragments, a mention of Miskatonic University, a reference to the Pennacotic manuscripts, and these lodge in consciousness like seeds. Some dismiss them as colorful invention. Others sense deeper currents and begin seeking more. The magazine's letter columns become forums for scholarly debate about fictional cosmologies treated with academic seriousness. After Lovecraft's death in 1937, August Derleth's Arkham House ensured these visions reached wider audiences through carefully curated collections. Derleth's systematization, coining Cthulhu Mythos and imposing structured cosmology, sometimes diverged from Lovecraft's pure indifference, adding moral conflicts the original author would have rejected. This codification stabilized the brand but blunted the blade. Even this apparent treachery becomes part of transmission, an irritant that forms a pearl, showing how ideas resist being tamed, maintaining essential character even when filtered through incompatible worldviews. Pause and reset the senses. A mail sack heavy with pulp, its rope cutting into your palm. Ink that smears in rain, leaving dark stains on eager fingers. A library stack smelling of dust and paste where forgotten volumes wait between better-known texts. A modern screen's cool light on your face at 2:13 a.m. as algorithms offer videos about cosmic horror. The mediums change dramatically, but the fundamental mechanic remains constant. Translation becomes crucial to transmission. A story about a color that should not exist reaches a German magazine with a slightly different hue, the translator's choices subtly altering the effect. A French fanzine smooths a sentence and adds a caesura, changing Revelation's rhythm. A Japanese anthology brings Shinto shadows to Innsmouth's coastline, creating hybrid horrors that honor both traditions. Each translation is a mask, custom fitted to a new cultural face, allowing the idea to infiltrate new consciousness while the core grammar remains intact. Modern transmission operates algorithmically. Your recommendations are a chorus master with no face, arranging sequences of content for maximum engagement. This creates a fascinating paradox. Private ritual conducted in public streams. You enter alone, but emerge with phrases others recognize, creating instant community through shared references. The sign becomes the community. The community becomes the spell. Digital platforms accelerate ancient patterns. Reddit threads become collaborative grimoires where users contribute fragments to expanding mythologies. YouTube channels offer hours-long explorations of fictional cosmologies presented with documentary seriousness. The Internet functions as a vast Necronomicon, accessible to anyone with curiosity and bandwidth, containing knowledge that transforms the seeker in the seeking. Objects accumulate like low-voltage sacraments. A sticker on a laptop etched with curling glyphs, a pendant shaped like a star with curious angles, usernames whispering of Erlier drifting through comment sections. These modern totems signal membership in invisible communities bound by recognition of fictional realities that feel more substantial than consensus truth. The ecosystem reveals itself as vast, ancient in temperament, if not age, utterly indifferent to human comfort, yet offering possibilities for consciousness that transcend limitations human experience taught you to accept as permanent. The transmission continues because ideas themselves are alive, seeking expression through whatever channels become available. Here lies the condition that carries us forward. Accept that the mythos functions as literature of citations, where each reference becomes a potential doorway. You become part of the relay now, a mind that carries signal without owning it, already sensing how knowledge acts upon the knower. If you remember nothing else, remember this. In Lovecraft's engine, the idea touches you back. The act of learning is not safe. It is not passive. It is reciprocal. You read the sign? The sign rereads your mind, adjusting its approach based on what it discovers there. The mechanism reveals itself in the space between what you know and what you think you know, a carefully constructed system for delivering truths that human consciousness cannot process without fundamental alteration. This is not metaphor, but precise description of how information operates when it exceeds the container designed to hold it. The first principle is knowledge as contagion, a viral transmission of understanding that spreads through consciousness like spores through damp air. Unlike conventional horror, where a monster might physically assault you, cosmic horror assaults your mind through revelation alone. The human mind evolved to navigate a relatively small, comprehensible world of immediate threats and local relationships. It is simply not equipped to process the sheer scale, the utter indifference, the fundamental alienness of the universe as it actually exists beyond our protective illusions. The dissonance is too great, the truth too annihilating for consciousness that developed to survive on one small planet. The germ is accuracy, the fever is perspective. You inhale these spores by reading, and they germinate without asking permission, reconfiguring your senses to check with a larger cosmos before they report to you. This contagion manifests through scale displacement, the systematic revelation that everything you thought was large and important is actually minuscule and irrelevant. Every Lovecraft story begins with a human-scaled problem, a family inheritance that brings unwanted property, an archaeological discovery that promises academic fame, a strange manuscript that seems to offer secret knowledge. Then the story systematically reveals that this problem exists within contexts so vast that human significance dissolves entirely like sugar in an ocean. The horror is not that you are threatened by something large, but that you discover you have always been infinitesimally small, always been irrelevant to the forces that actually govern existence. Your entire life becomes a receipt for aeons. Your species' history becomes white chalk scrawled at the bottom of a blackboard that has no edges. The second mechanic is temporal vertigo, the dizzying recognition that you exist within time scales that make human duration meaningless. Lovecraft's entities are not ancient in the way pyramids are ancient. They are ancient in the way bedrock is ancient, in the way starlight is old when it arrives. Their cycles are measured in tides of magma and ice, in the slow bloom and wither of galaxies. They were ancient when the earth was young. They will persist when the stars have died, and their activities operate according to cycles measured in geological epochs. Human life becomes not threatened, but contextualized, revealed as a brief flickering within processes so vast that consciousness itself appears to be an accident, a temporary arrangement of matter that achieved self-awareness by chance and will lose it again without consequence. Reset your senses. Damp paper that won't dry no matter how long you leave it near heat. The smell of disturbed soil rising from basement floors that seems to exhale something older than cities. The hollow hum under a city's subway that resonates like a bow pulled across concrete. A salt taste that arrives uncalled on your tongue when you read certain passages. These are minor keynotes the stories teach you to notice. In learning to notice them, you participate. You step onto the stage as more than an audience member. You become a prop that moves itself, a component in the very system you thought you were observing from outside. The texture of the world becomes the first line you memorize. The third principle is the inversion of knowledge, the complete reversal of conventional wisdom about learning and safety. In traditional horror, ignorance is dangerous and knowledge provides safety. The more you understand about the monster, the better equipped you become to fight or escape it. In Lovecraftian horror, knowledge itself is the threat. Every revelation makes the protagonist less safe, less sane, less capable of functioning as a human being. The more you understand about the true nature of reality, the less capable you become of functioning within the comfortable illusions that make human society possible. Truth becomes toxic. Understanding becomes contamination. The catastrophe is not teeth, but clarity. This creates the characteristic agency flip that defines cosmic horror's unique psychological impact. We are trained by culture to be protagonists, to believe that the stage was built for our entrances and exits, that plots hinge on our choices. In the Lovecraftian cosmos, agency is reclassified as noise within a larger signal. We are not actors on a stage. We are mere components in the dream of an entity so vast that our entire existence registers as less than a fleeting thought. The idea acts upon us. The knowledge reshapes us according to its own logic. Our choices reveal themselves as illusions. Our free will as a comforting lie we tell ourselves to avoid recognizing our actual position as objects rather than subjects. The transformation of consciousness follows mathematical curves that can be plotted and predicted with scientific precision. The progression from curiosity to investigation to revelation to transformation occurs according to formulas that describe the exact rate at which human psychological defenses dissolve under exposure to accurate information about reality. Each stage has half-lives, thresholds, points of irreversibility. The madness is not random chaos, but follows precise trajectories determined by the specific ways human consciousness encounters information it cannot integrate. A mind optimized for parochial survival is exposed to scales and durations for which it has no evolved tolerance. Symptoms follow like clockwork. So the condition that carries us forward, accept that meaning loss is not annihilation, but revelation, not destruction, but transformation into something capable of surviving contact with truth. The mechanism is already at work within you, reshaping your capacity to process reality according to formulas that will allow you to survive what cannot be unchanged. It begins with water. Always, the mundane first, an orchard where apples hang heavy against August heat, a well whose stone lip bears the smooth wear of generations, the taste of iron in a bucket carried through grass that whispers secrets to your ankles. The Gardner farm exists in that pastoral space Americans reserve for innocence, where soil and sweat produce abundance according to reliable equations. Then a meteorite splits the sky like a curtain tug and delivers a hue that does not exist in any spectrum human eyes were designed to process. In The Color Out of Space, the antagonist has no face, no mouth, no voice, only a spectrum impossibility that leaches fertility from soil, bone, and thought. This is ecological horror at its purest, a sabotage of life's fundamental grammar that teaches us how cosmic terror operates through contamination rather than confrontation. Watch how the mechanic moves through its phases with the precision of a chemical reaction. Perception comes first. The color blooms in the fruit like watercolor through wet paper, spreads through the tree's bark as veins of wrongness, rises from night fog like luminous smoke. It is not purple, though purple might be its closest approximation. It is not green, though green shadows follow in its wake. It is unnameable and therefore lodges in your cognition like a thorn, creating a category error your brain cannot resolve. Your visual cortex attempts to process what cannot be categorized, and in that futile attempt, something fundamental breaks. The familiar spectrum of visible light, once a comfort that organized the world into manageable bands, becomes a reminder of limitation. What else exists beyond the narrow slice of electromagnetic radiation human perception can detect? Cognition follows perception's collapse like infection following injury. The Gardner family's language begins to thin. Their sentences tangle into fragments that cannot carry the weight of their experience. They become spectators to their own decline, unable to narrate the cause because language itself lacks the architecture to contain what is happening to them. Words fail not through inadequacy, but through contamination. The color has entered their conceptual framework and is rewriting it from within. They speak of the color, but cannot describe it. They point to its effects, but cannot name the agent. The color rebrands a place, transforming familiar geography into alien territory. The map grows a stain that spreads beyond property lines, a zone of wrongness that infects even cartographic representation. Culture collapses last, the final domino in a sequence that moves from individual perception through family cognition to community consciousness. Neighbors begin to avoid the property, their avoidance initially rational, something is clearly wrong, but gradually becoming superstitious, then ritualistic. The region develops a reputation that outlasts visible evidence. The very coordinates become cursed, a set of numbers that carry contamination through abstract space. This is the three-channel contamination in perfect sequence: perceptual, cognitive, cultural, each level of human organization succumbing to the same impossible input. Place sensory anchors at the well's lip where the story's horror concentrates. Smell the mineral cold rising from depths that exhale something older than groundwater. Hear the bucket's rope creak against the pulley, a sound that becomes ominous through repetition, each draw bringing up water that tastes increasingly wrong. See the faint shimmer just below the surface, like light from a stage you cannot see, a luminescence that suggests presence where nothing should be present. This is a rural domestic setting, a space typically coded safe in American mythology, where honest labor and natural cycles provide stability against urban chaos. The horror emerges through inversion. The home becomes theater, the orchard a set for entropy. Fertility itself is revealed as contingent, fragile, a contract signed in a language we never learned to read. The very ground beneath your feet becomes unreliable, a stage that might collapse without warning. There is no monster to stab, no cult to disperse, no ancient evil to banish through ritual or scholarship. The antagonist is a process of unmaking that operates below the level of intention, leaving behind only mute color as evidence of its passage, a residue of wrongness that persists after active contamination has moved on. The tongues of science flicker helplessly when directed toward the phenomenon. Chemical analyses yield shifting results that contradict themselves between measurements. The meteorite fragment misbehaves in laboratory conditions, exhibiting properties that violate known physics. The instruments themselves become actors in a farce played for no human audience. Their readings, a form of testimony to forces that exceed their design parameters. The stage laughs without laughter, a cosmic joke whose punchline is the futility of human understanding. Modern ecology recognizes the chord this story strikes. We have words now for colors we wish were unseeable. The particular green of radioactive water, the orange of chemical fires, the iridescent sheen of petroleum on poisoned ground. The story survives because it is not fundamentally about aliens or supernatural forces. It is about the fragility of systems we mistake for permanent fixtures. The color reveals that normal was always an agreement, a mask, a stage set constructed to hide the provisional nature of arrangements we call reality. Note the crucial narrative technique. The story reaches us through layers of remove, told through hearsay and recollection, filtered through testimony of a surveyor who heard it from locals who remember what their grandfathers witnessed. There is a curtain within the curtain, a protective distance that should make the horror bearable. We are audience to an audience, observers of observers. This double remove protects us like a thin veil, yet even as it protects, it enables transmission. You feel safe hearing about it secondhand. Your mind reproduces the pattern anyway. The idea acts regardless of medium. When the reservoir finally arrives to drown the sight, water becomes the stage's last word. We do not bury what cannot be contained. We submerge it beneath a new surface that reflects the sky we do not understand. The well becomes a throat, the farm a mouth, the land itself trying to speak and failing, signal without message, meaning without recipient. You begin with a map and the smell of salt, a map that leads not to a destination, but to a question whose answer will reshape your understanding of space itself. You arrive by bus, past reeds that whisper in languages older than geometry, past shuttered windows that seem to watch with the patience of tides. The town reveals itself as a place whose angles are wrong not through architectural error, but because they remember a different pressure than air, the weight of fathoms, the mathematics of creatures that never needed to navigate by human rules. The shadow over Innsmouth is often summarized as fishmen and cults. But we will return to that revelation about identity later, when you are ready to understand that lineage is a mask and the sea is the face beneath. First, we must journey to the dreaming city where geometry itself becomes an actor in a drama designed to break human consciousness. The Call of Cthulhu presents Relia not as mere architecture but as a spatial weapon deliberately deployed against human cognition. The non-Euclidean geometries, angles that refuse to add up to expected sums, corridors that contain more distance than their dimensions should allow, spaces that fold back on themselves in ways that make mapping impossible, are not supernatural phenomena requiring mystical explanation, but accurate descriptions of what happens when consciousness encounters spatial information that cannot be processed within standard frameworks of human perception. Your brain evolved to navigate environments that follow predictable rules of Euclidean space. When those rules break down systematically, consciousness itself becomes unstable, not through magic, but through the simple fact that your spatial processing systems encounter input they were never designed to handle. Cthulhu has become the poster child, the plush toy, the tentacled green mascot whose cosmic horror has been domesticated into marketable cuteness. Beneath this merchandise lies a principle sharper than any claw. Relief functions as an architecture that rearranges your mind to accommodate its angles, and Cthulhu operates as a resonance, an organ pipe of impossible dimensions that vibrates through your dreams to test your psychological structural integrity. The story arrives as a dossier assembled from fragments, newspaper clippings yellow with age, police testimonies that contradict each other, a sculptor's feverish nightmare rendered in clay, a sailor's descent into hell told through rum and broken sentences. It is a collage whose real subject is not ancient monsters, but cognition's systematic failure at the edges of scale. Place your anchors in the investigative materials, a clay bas-relief that feels damp though it has been dry for decades, its surface somehow retaining the moisture of impossible dreams. Police records bearing coffee rings like ritual circles, the mundane bureaucracy of the inexplicable, a map whose lines don't intersect the way Euclidean geometry promises they should, creating spaces that shouldn't exist, but somehow accommodate themselves within reality's structure. The narrative deliberately transforms the audience into scholars, investigators reconstructing a stage from fragments and testimonies. You perform the ritual of research, cross-referencing accounts, and weighing evidence. And through this performance, you enter the circle without realizing the threshold has been crossed. The idea acts through your own investigative impulses, using curiosity as a vector for transmission. The mechanism emphasizes impossible space as a form of cognitive warfare. Angles meet in ways that violate the mathematical relationships your brain uses to navigate reality. Planes flow like liquid while maintaining the appearance of solid matter. Your spatial processing evolved to handle certain geometries, the predictable relationships that govern environments where human consciousness developed. Relia asks it to solve a different equation entirely, presenting spatial relationships that follow rules incompatible with human neurology. Vertigo ensues not as a side effect, but as the intended result. The sailors move through architecture that behaves like a flexible puzzle, its configuration shifting based on observation and intention. Doors open when they should remain closed. Distances become unreliable, stretching and contracting according to principles that mock measurement. Architecture becomes an active enemy of certainty, and thus serves as a priest of the void, conducting services that dissolve the foundations of rational thought. Cthulhu himself makes his appearance, but the encounter functions like a mathematical proof rather than a monster movie confrontation. When the massive head emerges from Arlaya's depths, the air itself thickens, becoming viscous with presence that exceeds physical description. When the body towers into visibility, time becomes unreliable, stretching and compressing in ways that make sequential narrative impossible. Contact remains brief, ambiguous, contradictory depending on whose account receives emphasis. The effect is not to establish biological facts about the creature, but to demonstrate scale. The crushing recognition that human consciousness operates within frameworks utterly inadequate to process what actually exists. This explains why the creature's apparent defeat, rammed by a steamship and temporarily dispersed, does not read as triumph, but as punctuation, a brief pause between movements in a symphony whose full scope exceeds human comprehension. The cults scattered across the story function as choirs warming up for a performance whose audience has not yet arrived. Each city where the worship spreads, each language in which the chants are uttered, each ritual performed in basement rooms that smell of candles and mildew, represents a different way the central idea rehearses itself through human mouths, fitting masks to faces that were never designed to wear them. The chorus master has no face, because the conductor is the music itself, a resonance that prepares consciousness for contact with scales it cannot survive unchanged. Ia, ia. Syllables that make the tongue a metronome keeping time with processes that operate on geological scales where human duration becomes irrelevant. Reset your senses. Damp clay under fingernails that leaves residue of impossible textures. Coffee gone cold in police basements where fluorescent lights buzz like insects. Tar on ropes that leaves black crescents on your hands. The rhythmic clack of a ceiling fan whose shadow ticks across your notes like a countdown. These anchors prevent dissolution into pure abstraction, reminding you that ideas require bodies to carry them, and bodies have weight the void cannot cancel. This chapter's twist arrives gently, almost imperceptibly. The city dreams you, as you imagine it. This is not fantasy but function, not metaphor but mechanism. The act of imagining Relea trains your perception, lowers your psychological resistances, extends invitations to dreams that carry more than entertainment. The story demonstrates that investigation becomes incantation, that research transforms into ritual. Your late-night internet rabbit holes, diving deep into wikis and forums, following links that lead to stranger links, operate according to the same fundamental mechanic as the doomed sailor's voyage through impossible geometry. You scroll, they sail. You both arrive where angles argue with the bones of your head, where the geometry of madness reveals itself as a pedagogy designed to teach you how easily maps betray their makers. Set your senses in the salt-thick air where revelation waits. Brine on your tongue that tastes of ancestry you never claimed, a flavor that lingers long after you've left the coast. Wood swollen with rot, its fibers giving way underfoot and exhaling decades of fog and neglect. The slick of algae on stone steps leading down to forgotten piers, treacherous and green. Each footfall a negotiation with surfaces that want you to slip. A hotel room whose thin curtains cannot block street lamps that buzz like hornets trapped in amber glass, their sickly yellow light pressing through fabric like water through a membrane. Hear the distant surf, a metronome that has been keeping time since before the town had a name, each wave a beat in a rhythm that predates human music, marking time for something far older than clocks. The chase scene in The Shadow over Innsmouth reveals itself as a masterclass in environmental stagecraft, a meticulous choreography where every element conspires toward revelation. This is not about claws or supernatural strength, but about layout as liturgy, architecture as antagonist. Doors stick at precisely the wrong moments with the timing of theatrical cues. Boards creak under weight they were designed to bear. Streets funnel your escape routes toward the water with the patience of tides. Roofs splinter just as you attempt to cross gaps you cannot properly judge. The town itself functions as a maze that wants you, its geometry conspiring to deliver you to the sea that waits with oceanic patience. Mechanically, Innsmouth demonstrates the careful choreography of revelation, each stage building toward the moment when knowledge becomes inescapable inheritance. First comes urban legend and whisper gossip, fragments that sound like folklore until you notice how consistently they align across different sources. Then artifacts emerge, carvings that hurt to look at directly, jewelry wrought from unknown metals that seems to move in peripheral vision, a tiara like a fossilized wave that suggests forms of beauty human aesthetics were never designed to appreciate. The architecture itself begins to assert its strangeness. Buildings that lean toward the water as if drawn by magnetic force, windows placed at angles that create impossible sightlines, doorways shaped for figures that do not match human proportions. Finally comes the hunt itself, the breath-scraping sprint through fog that transforms familiar geography into corridors where every turn leads deeper into the town's wet embrace. At each step, the stage asserts itself with increasing boldness. The sea functions as a character without needing dialogue, a pressure system that writes its script directly into human bone, reshaping those who live within its influence according to patterns older than terrestrial life. The core twist, the second-person implication that transforms observer into participant, arrives not as surprise, but as inevitability. Like a tide you thought was wind, the narrator discovers he shares the town's heritage, that the grotesque destiny he feared for others is written in his own cellular structure. This is not external threat, but internal recognition. You are not merely learning about the cult. You are being inducted through genealogy itself. Knowledge as contagion, which operated through light and perception in previous encounters, here becomes knowledge as ancestry, information that cannot be rejected because it is already part of your blood. The mask is not removable because it was never a mask. It was always your face, temporarily obscured by illusions of purely human lineage. This vector rhymes with the color's contamination, but travels through different channels, through cheekbones and dreams, through the way mirrors begin to prefer you when rooms grow dark. What principle emerges from this revelation? That identity functions as an ongoing negotiation between inheritance and environment, between the constructed mask of selfhood and the deeper currents that constantly press from beneath conscious awareness. The Innsmouth look, the bulging eyes that suggest adaptation to underwater pressure, the receding hairline that reveals skull shapes designed for different purposes, the pallid skin that hints at metabolisms adapted to oceanic rather than terrestrial conditions, represents more than simple mutation. It is a terrifying symbol of compromised lineage, a slow, inexorable transformation that reveals the boundaries we defend with combs and collars and passports as surface tensions spread thin across depths that do not recognize our categories. The horror of Innsmouth transcends simple disgust at physical transformation. The true revelation is that the self you thought was solid and permanent is actually a stage, and that all stages are built in water before they are built on land. Identity reveals itself as a temporary arrangement, a brief configuration of matter that maintained its shape only through constant effort against forces that seek to return it to more fundamental patterns. In the story's surreal ending, where the narrator anticipates his own transformation not as curse, but as return, horror exceeds simple revulsion and becomes a form of contact. The cosmic mechanic functions here as reconciled dread. Reality is wider than human frameworks can contain, and you belong to more of it than you wish to acknowledge. Reset your senses. The smell of kelp rotting sweetly behind warehouses, the slick paint of a door that leaves green residue on your palm, the grid of sand between your teeth when you wake, window panes that fog on the outside as if the town were breathing you. The sea writes you in too, its text, whether you consent or not. Your family photo album looks different when examined under moonlight, revealing features you never noticed in daylight's forgiving illumination. A cousin's eyes set a fraction wider, An ancestor's jaw hinged for larger purposes. Your reflection in still water edits you, showing possibilities your mirror conceals. This is the agency flip personified, not merely that you lack control over external circumstances, but that what you thought was you was always a temporary arrangement, a surface tension on deeper currents. The ocean is not foreign invader, but fundamental constituent, the primordial medium from which consciousness emerged and to which it inevitably returns. The transformation follows predictable patterns that reflect specific environmental encounters. Maritime communities develop forms of consciousness adapted to oceanic scales of time and space, their awareness shaped by proximity to forces that operate according to rhythms incompatible with terrestrial life. The children born into these communities represent natural evolutionary developments, exhibiting capacities that normal human psychology would classify as impossible. The ability to perceive across multiple frameworks simultaneously, to communicate with forms of consciousness that exist within matter itself. They are not monsters, but pioneers, early examples of what humanity becomes when properly adapted to the universe it actually inhabits, rather than the comfortable illusion it prefers to maintain. You stand at the seawall now, listening as the town exhales through boards and drains, and somewhere beneath the wharf, a choir begins, teaching your lungs the oldest hymn of pressure, the song that calls you home to depths that remember your name in a language older than words. It is time to take the masks down and hold them to the light, until the paint thins and the wood shows through. What remains are principles, mathematical constants wearing mythology like stage makeup. The pantheon reveals itself not as a cast of characters with personalities and motivations, but as a periodic table of cosmic forces, each entity embodying fundamental aspects of reality that human consciousness was never designed to comprehend. This is the reframe twist that transforms horror from entertainment into education. Lovecraft's monsters are not beings to be defeated through heroics, but laws to be understood, structural elements of a universe that operates according to principles utterly alien to human concerns and completely indifferent to human survival. Azathoth functions not as a demon at the center of creation, but as the blind churn of unobserved process, the nuclear chaos of a universe that requires no witness to continue existing. The demon sultan, whose dreams constitute reality, represents the ultimate creation inversion twist that demolishes comfortable cosmologies. The beginning is not light and order emerging from darkness, but blind, idiotic chaos, a cosmic drone whose unconscious dreams constitute all existence. The horror lies in the complete annihilation of purpose, the realization that our lives are ephemeral shadows flickering through a dream that could end without notice. The sensory anchor manifests as thin, monotonous piping, sound that simultaneously lulls and maddens, echoed now in the quiet of a radiology suite before the machine spins, in the soft drone of servers in basement data centers that process information without human oversight. There is no conductor, the orchestra plays itself, and purpose dissolves like sugar in black water. Yog-Sothoth operates not as a bearded threshold keeper, but as contiguity itself, the adjacency of all times and places when viewed from outside linear causality. Key and gate at once, lock and corridor, veil and void, made manifest. This principle embodies the horror of temporal vertigo, existing simultaneously across multiple frameworks of space and time, making human concepts of sequential causality not merely inadequate, but actively misleading. You glimpse this principle whenever GPS falters in a tunnel and then snaps you forward, rewriting the route as if no path had existed in between. Latency becomes omen. Those eerie pauses when satellites lose signal reveal the fragility of our temporal constructs. Moments when you exist temporarily outside the grid, where cause and effect become courtesy. We extend to ourselves rather than universal law. Shub-Niggurath functions not as a fertility goddess dispensing blessings, but as the horror beauty of proliferation itself. The unstoppable branching of patterns once a system exceeds its regulatory mechanisms. This principle embodies both creation and corruption simultaneously, forcing recognition that growth and decay are aspects of the same fundamentally indifferent process. The black goat of the woods with 1,000 young represents life's terrifying capacity to exceed all boundaries, to become monstrous through its own success. You witness this in the spring lake when algae erupts into velvet green churn, transforming water into living soup, in mold that maps galaxies across forgotten bread, in network graphs that knot until they resemble root systems tearing through infrastructure. Growth and rot share a pulse because life is the excess of pattern, and what we call corruption is often only success uninterested in our comfort. Nyarlathotep serves as the interface, information that adapts its costume to slip past your filters. Unlike the others, he appears active and manipulative, capable of assuming myriad forms, but even this apparent personality is function rather than character. He represents cosmic deception operating through information itself, the insidious penetration of alien truth through channels designed to appear familiar and trustworthy. The agency flip arrives here with algorithmic precision. You think, you click. The message chooses your finger. Here basement data centers, where server fans purr like hives that learned hymns, see glowing rectangles in dark rooms where scrolling text fits your hand better than sleep. He is the mask that smiles, the link that tempts, the charismatic interface that sells you both the knife and your reflection in its blade. Cthulhu, as previous examination revealed, operates as resonance, not a beast, but a chord, an organ pipe the size of a city tuned to the geology of dreams. He embodies ancient, indifferent power in the crushing weight of geological time made manifest. His slumber represents active psychic emanation, subtle influence that seeps into dreams across vast distances, driving sensitive minds toward recognition of humanity's cosmic insignificance. The boat that rams him does not achieve victory. It merely stutters the measure. The music resumes in tides and migraines and sculptures that sweat in forgotten drawers, because frequency survives interruption. Why strip the masks and insist on laws rather than characters? Because treating entities as personalities fundamentally misleads, drawing attention toward heroics and away from structure, encouraging the comfortable delusion that cosmic forces can be defeated through sufficient courage or cleverness. Treating them as laws clarifies the actual nature of the fear. These are not beings that can be beheaded or banished, but realities that must be understood and endured. The stage on which human drama plays out is fundamentally indifferent to human concerns, and the cast is composed of physics, some aspects already mapped by science, others not yet named, but equally implacable. You are not outside this system. The principles wear names so you can point at them without going blind. But you carry their influence in the hum of your phone, the pause when navigation loses satellites, the green bloom that returns to scrubbed surfaces by noon. Names become veils that let you look longer at forces that would otherwise dissolve consciousness through direct contact. The pantheon serves as translation layer between human psychology and cosmic reality, making truths bearable that would otherwise prove annihilating. Reset your senses. Rubber smell of server cables, cool tile under your heel in hospital corridors, green scum along ponds where geese refuse to land, brief silence when devices lose connection to networks. These are not omens but rehearsals, micro stages where macro law practices for an audience of one. The condition for continuing: agree to treat the pantheon as grammar rather than gossip. Use names as tools rather than totems. Let law replace villain and structure replace plot. On the other side waits a quiet room full of instruments we will carry into the modern night. Open the curtain wider until the theater encompasses everything you thought existed outside it. The indifferent universe is not metaphor, but measurement, not poetry, but physics rendered in numbers that dwarf human comprehension. The cosmic microwave. Background whispers a temperature to 12 significant figures, 2.725 Kelvin, the afterglow of creation itself. Fossil radiation that bathes everything in the memory of when space first became transparent to light. Between galaxy clusters lie voids so vast that light's patience looks like haste. Empty regions, hundreds of millions of light years across, where darkness reigns not as absence, but as presence, the fundamental substrate from which matter emerges like rare punctuation in an infinite text. Black holes curve space into gravitational wells so deep that geometry becomes a trap, creating regions where cause and effect lose sequential relationship and time becomes a direction you can fall through. The Fermi paradox stands like an empty theater with billions of seats and profound silence, suggesting either we are alone or intelligence inevitably learns to be quiet. All this represents Azathoth without ceremonial drums, pure process, obeyed whether consciousness exists to witness it, whether or not we applaud. The universe operates according to principles that preceded awareness and will outlast it, following equations containing no variables for hope, meaning, or the particular arrangements of carbon that briefly achieve self-reflection before dissolving back into simpler chemistry. This does not prove Lovecraft prophetic. It contextualizes him as sensitive instrument calibrated to detect frequencies most human consciousness filters out for psychological survival. The night sky reveals itself as neither hostile nor benevolent, but silent. Silence that manifests as terror when you expect conversation, as clarity when you stop demanding response. Modern science continuously reinforces Lovecraftian perspective through discoveries that expand knowledge while simultaneously diminishing human significance, revealing cosmos operating on scales and according to principles that render terrestrial concerns categorically irrelevant. Psychology adds another layer to this architecture, an inner stage with physical laws. The brain functions as prediction machine, constantly generating models of reality that senses then correct or confirm. Horror exploits this by feeding the prediction engine signals it cannot reconcile, angles that contradict geometric expectations, colors refusing linguistic categorization, whispers fitting too many interpretive masks simultaneously. Lovecraft discovered the exact frequency that makes cognitive dissonance feel majestic and malignant at once, resonance between veil and void that transforms confusion into revelation. Your brain attempts to process impossible input, and in that attempt, something fundamental reconfigures. The shiver is your nervous system admiring an accurate model even as it protests the cost. Consider how Lovecraftian principles saturate contemporary media, often unconsciously echoing themes that emerged a century ago. Annihilation walks a team into refracting ecosystem where DNA behaves like stained glass, cognition dissolving as knowledge germinates, perfect manifestation of contamination as revelation. Arrival transforms language into Yog-Sothoth's temporal loop, where understanding becomes time travel and communication transcends linear causality. Interstellar presents vast, indifferent scales, rendering love and meaning as local phenomena that do not translate across cosmic distances. Video games push further inward. Bloodborne rewards insight with madness, while Control builds federal stage where objects accumulate meanings like moss and corridors, sheer into other directions when nobody looks. Each medium becomes another mask fitted to the same underlying law. Reset your senses to modern manifestations. The hiss in headphones between tracks that sounds like cosmic background radiation. Gray glow persisting behind closed eyelids after screen exposure, phosphine afterimage suggesting visual processing of absent light. The way cold seems to hum in winter rooms as if temperature were frequency your bones detect. These become inner cosmos cues, reminders that you exist as stage where cosmic principles perform through human neurology. Your mind contains back room full of props, memories, biases, expectations that can be rearranged by suggestion. Cosmic horror operates as gentle hypnosis, teaching what to expect when you look at stars, not narrative, but scale, not meaning, but measurement. The Internet functions as modern Necronomicon, accessible grimoire whose pages are links, ink is bandwidth, marginalia are comments breeding in digital dark. Recommendation algorithms serve as faceless chorus masters, arranging content sequences for maximum engagement rather than human well-being, creating feedback loops, amplifying whatever captures attention most effectively. This generates characteristic paradox, private ritual conducted through public streams. You enter alone, but emerge carrying phrases others recognize, creating instant community through shared references that feel ancient despite digital mediation. The sign becomes community. Community becomes spellbinding consciousness to patterns larger than individual awareness. Modern culture exhibits both successful echoes and instructive misfires. Some adaptations retreat into comfortable monster as villain narratives, restoring human agency and cosmic justice. Others preserve law as structure approach, making entities into principles and horror into education. You recognize which adaptations stick, ones leaving you seeing your apartment as temporary set after midnight, making sinks slow drip sound like metronome, keeping time for processes operating outside human narrative frameworks. Ethically, we must sift carefully through this inheritance. We refuse Lovecraft's human prejudices while preserving cosmic humility his work enables, using vastness to grow quieter rather than crueler, to suffer less egocentrism rather than more despair. Cosmic indifference does not forbid kindness. It makes kindness entirely our choice rather than quota imposed by benevolent universe. In cosmos, unconcerned with cruelty or gentleness, gentleness becomes rebellion against indifference, local arrangement of matter, choosing meaning, despite absence of cosmic validation. The algorithms continue their work, arranging content that keeps you scrolling, learning preferences better than you know them. The transmission continues through fiber optic cables, carrying fragments of forbidden knowledge to screens glowing in dark rooms where consciousness encounters ideas, reshaping it in the encountering. You are part of this network now, node through which cosmic horror propagates into forms adapted to contemporary media. The curtain remains open. The stage expands. The performance continues whether or not the audience understands its role. By now, you can feel the techniques in your bones, like a new rhythm your nervous system has learned to match. The anaphora that rocks you between certainty and void. The parallelism that sets your breath to cosmic cadence. The paradox pairs, key and gate, veil and void, that trick your brain into holding contradiction like a candle you cannot drop without burning yourself on truth. But here is the earned revelation, the twist that was always visible if you knew how to read the stage directions. This transmission, this careful script with its calm voice and deliberate sensory anchors, has been an engine of precisely the same type Lovecraft imagined when he conceived texts that transform their readers in the reading. You are in the circle now, not by accident of curiosity, but by design as meticulous as R'lyeh's architecture. You were warned at the threshold in the very first breath. The idea acts on you, the decision to seek this forbidden knowledge, to willingly engage with concepts of cosmic indifference rather than seeking comfort in familiar illusions, has made you an initiate in traditions older than print. The whispers across aeons have found a new host, your consciousness, now primed and receptive to frequencies most minds filter out for psychological survival. The veil between comfortable reality and cosmic truth has been permanently thinned, worn transparent by sustained attention to what human psychology was never designed to process unchanged. This is not menace, but admission, not threat, but recognition. This has been a careful, deliberate descent into forms of understanding that exceed the boundaries of terrestrial concerns. Think of the specific moments that marked your transformation, each chosen not merely to inform, but to seed. The color that ruined wells and revealed perception as contingent rather than absolute. The town that made ancestry a mask and blood a script written by pressures deeper than genetics. The city whose geometry dreams you as you attempt to map its angles. The principles wearing mythological names to make cosmic law bearable to consciousness evolved for local survival. Now notice how your immediate environment feels different. The darkness pooling in corners seems less empty and more staged, as if shadows were props arranged for performance you have not yet learned to see. The sound of your heater becomes not just mechanical function, but hum, frequency connecting to larger orchestrations operating beyond the walls of your attention. This is not paranoia developing, but literacy emerging. You have learned to read the set on which human drama performs. The circular nature of this journey reflects the actual structure of cosmic horror itself. Not linear progression from ignorance to knowledge, but deepening spiral that reveals each level of understanding to be simultaneously ending and beginning. The threshold you crossed was not destination, but doorway into permanent condition, a state of existence between what you were before contact and what you are becoming through sustained exposure to truths consciousness cannot metabolize unchanged. You cannot return to simple assumptions about reality's structure or humanity's significance within processes that operate according to principles utterly indifferent to terrestrial concerns. Consider the implications cascading through your altered awareness. If the universe operates according to laws that take no account of human meaning, if consciousness represents temporary arrangement of matter that achieved self-reflection by accident, if sanity itself functions as fragile construct protecting awareness from overwhelming recognition of actual conditions, then merely knowing this changes everything. It transforms how you interpret the silence between stars, not emptiness, but profound, unlistening presence. It changes how you understand individual existence within geological timescales, how you perceive human endeavor as local phenomenon that requires no cosmic validation. The sensory anchors we carefully placed, the mineral cold, the damp air that exhales something older than cities, the impossible geometries, these are no longer literary devices but potential triggers, subtle reminders that the world you inhabit operates according to principles far more precarious than consensus reality admits. This transformation connects you to networks of consciousness extending across all territories we have explored. The literary lineage transmitting dangerous knowledge through generations of carriers. The mathematical frameworks governing how awareness reconfigures when exposed to information exceeding its processing capacity. The information ecologies operating through human attention in forms adapted to contemporary media. You are no longer simply consuming this transmission, but participating in its continuation, becoming active node through which these patterns can propagate to other consciousness prepared for similar transformation. Your shares and whispers, your quiet recommendations, and the care with which you pronounce certain names become vectors carrying signal without claiming ownership. There is a twist nested within the larger twist, revelation that emerges only when the full architecture becomes visible. The audience is the phenomenon because horror reveals itself as structural rather than external threat. If the universe operates according to principles indifferent to human concerns, then the only drama that exists is meaning you choose to stage upon cosmic silence. You are not punished by knowledge, but invited to compose, not diminished by truth, but freed to create significance that requires no cosmic validation. The vast cold remains vast and cold. You remain warm, capable of kindness that becomes rebellion against indifference. The pantheon transforms from objects of worship or fear into glossary you can use or ignore. Azathoth for process, Yog-Sothoth for adjacency, Shub-Niggurath for proliferation, Nyarlathotep for interface, Cthulhu for resonance. Keep them beside your other tools: skepticism, wonder, patience. Your gentleness remains your choice, your cruelty equally your responsibility. Practice this new posture in small, repeatable acts. When you step outside, look up, not for omens, but for scale, and allow your eyes to accept how little the sky cares about the face that looks back. Listen to the heaters drone as distant serve. Let street lamps buzz their thin piping that reminds you the orchestra plays with or without audience. Draw curtains and notice fabric's weight. Dust motes drifting like slow constellations in your room. At the sink, watch surface vibrations gather and erase themselves, rehearsal for larger tides. These become ways of living within truth too large for comfort, yet too accurate for denial. The condition for accepting this final curtain requires consent transformed into composure. Agree that whisper carries more truth than roar, that silence teaches more than noise, that the stage continues whether or not you understand your role within its vast, indifferent performance. The transmission continues through you now, as it continued through Lovecraft, as it has continued through all who have served as conscious carriers for patterns of knowledge that reshape awareness in the knowing. You cannot unknow what you have learned, but you can choose how to carry what cannot be forgotten, how to live with cosmic indifference without becoming indifferent yourself, how to stage meaning on a silent stage without demanding applause from empty seats. The circle closes by opening outward. The curtain falls by rising higher. You are the phenomenon now, and the phenomenon is choice enacted within conditions of absolute freedom. We arrive where we began, but transformed by the journey through territories of knowledge that have reconfigured our capacity to understand what we thought we knew about horror, consciousness, and reality itself. The threshold that seemed like a boundary to be crossed reveals itself as a permanent condition, a climate you now inhabit, rather than a doorway you passed through. Once you exist between human limitation and cosmic awareness, between comfortable fictions that make daily life possible and truths that render human society irrelevant to forces governing existence. The curtain did not lift, it thinned. Until you learn to see through its weave, you are still human. You are also something wider than human. The ultimate philosophical framework emerges with almost embarrassing simplicity. The deepest horror is not malevolence, but indifference. The revelation that the universe operates according to principles not merely alien to human concerns, but utterly unaware of human existence. This represents fundamental inversion of every anthropocentric assumption consciousness makes to protect itself from accurate perception. We inhabit not a universe that hates humanity. Hatred would at least acknowledge our significance as worthy targets, but one that has never noticed humanity exists, one in which human meaning is not diminished or threatened, but simply absent from the equations governing reality. The cosmic processes determining stellar formation and galactic collision contain no variables for hope, justice, or the particular arrangements of carbon that briefly achieve self-reflection before dissolving back into simpler chemistry. The entities embody this principle of absolute indifference with mathematical precision. Cthulhu does not harbor malice toward humanity. He remains unaware that humanity exists in any sense that would register within his cosmic framework. His awakening would bring not deliberate destruction motivated by hatred, but incidental obliteration, the way your footsteps obliterate ant colonies during casual walks without malice, awareness, or the slightest adjustment of trajectory to accommodate microscopic civilizations crushed beneath your heel. Azathoth does not brood over creation. Process simply processes, like wind across dark water that never pauses to consider what it moves. The horror lies not in being targeted by cosmic forces, but in recognizing that cosmic forces operate entirely without reference to human values, survival, or concepts of meaning developed through terrestrial evolution. This indifference extends to reality's fundamental structure itself. The non-Euclidean geometries that drive consciousness toward madness were not designed by malevolent intelligence to harm human minds. They exist according to mathematical principles that take no account of human psychological limitations. The temporal scales on which cosmic processes unfold, stellar life cycles measured in billions of years, galactic rotations requiring hundreds of millions of years to complete single revolution, render human lifespans not merely brief, but irrelevant as measurement units. To be shattered by proportion is simply to be measured accurately for the first time. The measurement does not flinch because numbers neither console nor accuse. Yet this recognition paradoxically opens possibilities for forms of meaning that transcend human limitations rather than destroying meaning entirely. Once consciousness accepts that it operates within a universe utterly indifferent to its existence, it becomes free to develop significance that does not depend on cosmic validation. Meaning, unmoored from the stars, becomes meaning you author. Kindness that needs no witness becomes harder and truer. In the auditorium of the void, you decide the script you will speak, and your voice is enough for the seat you occupy. The post-human consciousness emerging from sustained contact with Lovecraftian truth is not nihilistic, but liberated, free to create meaning within conditions of absolute freedom, to choose compassion without cosmic mandate, to develop values that require no external justification beyond the choice to enact them. Notice how the stars behave in your thoughts now. They no longer hint at benevolent design. They function as coordinates, bright pins on a chart rolled across midnight's desk. The entities you learn to rename return as tools rather than tyrants. Azathoth becomes process wherever systems run without listeners. Server rooms purring like cicadas at midnight, lungs moving in sleep. Yog-Sothoth becomes adjacency whenever timelines fold, when memory and prediction briefly touch hands. Shub-Niggurath becomes proliferation, where ideas overgrow their trellises and molds bloom overnight. Nyarlathotep becomes interface each time messages wear faces you trust. Cthulhu becomes resonance when dreams adopt tides. None require belief. All require respect, the kind given to weather. The resolution arrives as whisper rather than scream, settling into existential thesis that transforms terror into clarity. The silence of the void is not empty quiet, but profound, overwhelming quietude that swallows all human cries and aspirations. The stars burn according to nuclear processes that began billions of years before consciousness existed. Cold, silent witnesses to infinity that holds no regard for terrestrial hopes or fears. The darkness between them is not empty space, but presence, vast ancient consciousness that simply is, utterly beyond comprehension, utterly unmoved by fleeting existence that briefly achieved self-awareness before returning to elements from which it emerged. This represents the inevitability Lovecraft ultimately reveals, not threat to be averted through heroic action, but conditioned to be accepted with whatever grace consciousness can muster. We are not the center. We are not even on the periphery. We are merely happenstance, fleeting patterns in cosmic dance that has no choreographer and no audience. The greatest horror lies not in what catastrophe might befall humanity, but in what already is, fundamental reality operating according to principles unadorned by meaning, unconcerned with consciousness that observes them. Reset your senses one final time. The taste of water, carrying minerals dissolved from stones older than complex life. The weight of air pressing against your skin, electromagnetic radiation your eyes interpret as narrow slice of infinite spectrum. These become not omens, but facts, not symbols, but measurements. The transmission continues through networks you now understand yourself to be part of, carrying signal without claiming ownership. Others will approach the threshold seeking comfortable explanations and finding instead transformation into something capable of functioning within actual conditions rather than protective illusions. The cycle continues Knowledge propagates, using minds as medium through which cosmic truth achieves its own continuation. The whisper carries farther than the roar. The circle closes by opening wider. The stage remains indifferent, and upon it you choose your lines with precision, knowing the silence will not applaud, knowing the darkness will not judge, knowing your voice is enough for the space you occupy. We began with a soft social cue and a promise that Lovecraftian horror transcends tentacled silhouettes under sick moons. We kept the promise by unmasking monsters into principles, principles into structures, indifference, contiguity, proliferation, resonance, interface. We placed sensory anchors like tokens on the stage so you would not drift. We braided lineage and mechanism, case and cosmos, psychology and ethics, until the idea could speak without shouting. This is the whisper. The universe is a theater without an audience, and yet the play can be beautiful. The monsters were always misdirection, comfortable fiction allowing human consciousness to process information about cosmic horror without recognizing that horror was not external, but structural, not about what might happen to humanity, but about what humanity actually is within larger contexts of existence. Recall the orchard's well, the town's brine, the city's angles, the principles wearing names. Feel again the hum under your window. None of these are threats now. They are instruments. You can hear the music because you know it is not for you. That is the freedom, to love a night sky that does not love you back, and still make tea, still put on a mask to tell a story, still leave a sign for someone else who needs a handle. The knowledge has changed you. You cannot return to simple assumption that horror comes from outside, that consciousness is separate from reality. It observes that human significance is anything more than local arrangement of matter that has developed capacity to create elaborate fictions about its own importance. You have become something that can survive contact with truth, something that can function within actual conditions of existence rather than protective illusions. The mythos becomes a toolbox. Use Azathoth to name process that does not care. Use Yog-Sothoth when you sense time's touching. Use Shub-Niggurath to respect how growth can be horror and grace at once. Use Nyarlathotep to keep wary of messages that wear any face. Use Cthulhu to measure resonance of dreams. This is not worship, it is grammar. The curtain has not merely been drawn back, it has dissolved. The stage is the cosmos, and you are inextricably woven into its vast, indifferent tapestry. But this realization is not conquest, it is truce. You see the stars and do not demand script from them, you write yours. The pantheon becomes glossary you can use or not. Azathoth hums regardless. The sea rises and falls. Your kindness remains your line. Reset your senses one final time. The taste of water, carrying minerals older than complex life. The weight of air pressing against your skin. Electromagnetic radiation your eyes interpret as narrow slice of infinite spectrum. These become not omens, but facts, not symbols, but measurements. You are a stage two, and consciousness operates the lights. And, as promised, we seed the next circle. Beyond these principles lies wider cosmology. Voices from Clark Ashton Smith's dying sons, Arthur Macon's ecstatic survivals, contemporary archives where curiosity plays with containment. There are other stages, other masks. The audience grows by whisper, not by shout. We end where we started, at the curtain. You may close it now or leave it ajar. You know the ropes. You know that the stage persists with or without you, and that your role is not to be crushed, but to be precise. To choose words that do not flatter unduly, to keep kindness as rebellion against indifference, to sleep well even under stars. The condition we leave you with is gentle and inevitable. If the idea is acted on you, let it make you quieter and more awake. The monster was never the point. The point was learning how to see the stage